How y'all doing? Well, it's Sunday, August 15th, 2021. We're over halfway through 2021, and we thought 2020 was the year from hell, and 2021 hadn't been just a whole heck of a lot better for us, doesn't seem like. Doggone pandemic. We're not going to go there. Talked last week about debt, credit, borrowing money, mortgages on houses, buying cars, that kind of thing. Let's talk a little bit about, stay on the subject of money. Let's talk a little bit about saving. You know, it's, with this pandemic and everything, it has had the economy shut down. Been a lot of things going on politically. People looking to the government to bail them out because they weren't prepared to take care of themselves. And I can just tell you, depending on the government is not a winning option. That's if you read a little bit of history, you'll find out that those that depended on the government wound up getting screwed in the long run. So, in order to keep from being in a position where you're having to depend on the government or anybody else for that matter, you want to be independent. You want to be the captain of your own ship, so to speak, and you want to be in control of your lives. You're entitled to that. That's one of the great things about our country is you ought to be able to do just as well as you've got the gumption to do without any interference from anybody else. As long as you're not breaking any laws or infringing on anybody else's rights, then knock yourself out and go for the goal. Life is not all about the money, but we do need a certain amount to get by, and trying to depend on others to keep you from, take this eviction thing. They've got this moratorium where people can't be evicted for not paying their rent. Well, that's wonderful. On the surface, it sounds great. The problem with that is somebody somewhere is paying for that piece of property, and now they're not getting their income from it, so they're just out. And you say, well, what about these big property management companies own all these apartment houses and whatnot? Yeah, you got a point there. They're a little different animal. But truth of the matter is, there's probably as many people like me, and I don't own any rent property, but just ordinary working stiffs. They bought a piece of property. They're renting it out to somebody. For payments every month, and the payments probably, the rent payment they're collecting at the end of the day probably doesn't cover everything that they have to spend on that house. By the time you figure they've got the rent, the property, their own mortgage payment, they got the property taxes on it, they got insurance on it that over and above whatever the renter might be carrying. They got maintenance and upkeep and termite control, the list just goes on, and the dishwasher goes out or plumbing stops up. And so at the end of the day, they're probably at best, on a month-to-month basis, they're at a break-even proposition, and what they're hoping is that basically somebody else is paying for their property. And at some point in the distant future, they'll be able to sell that property, and it will, first of all, have appreciated in value, and they'll have a little bit of money towards their own retirement. And I've got several friends that do that very thing. They own 2 or 3 houses that they rent out, and they don't really, at the end of the year, they really haven't made any money off of that. If they made $500 or $1,000, they've done well. But their ultimate objective is that when it does come time to get ready to retire, they can sell those houses and have some money towards retirement. If the houses are paid for, they may choose to keep them, and now they've got a little bit of source of income. Well, this moratorium that they've got on evictions, it doesn't allow for that. Now all of a sudden these folks, they're still making their payments every month, but they're not collecting rent. Anyway, that really wasn't what this was going to be about, but it kind of illustrates the point that I do want to make. Learn to save. Back in the olden days, when I was a kid, they used to call it saving for a rainy day. Well, Texas, as a state, currently has what they call a rainy day fund. It's money that comes out of taxes that goes specifically into this fund that's called the rainy day fund, and it's specifically for out of the ordinary stuff that comes up, and politically speaking, it's hard to get them to spend that money. But the idea being is individually we save some money for a rainy day. The general rule of thumb is you ought to have 6 months worth of living expenses and savings at any given time. So if your rent and utilities and grocery bill and light bill and gasoline for your car and you all that, let's just say it's $2,000 a month, well then you need $12,000 in the bank. That's really hard to do, and it's especially really hard to start out. And folks talk about, at least I've heard the example before, people tithing at church and giving 10%. And I've heard people say, well, okay, don't give 10%. Give what you can, just do it every week. That's kind of the way with saving. What I would suggest is that you start saving now. If you've got retirement plans at your work, get involved in them now. You will be shocked at how fast they add up. I never had one until I came back to Texas in 2010. And I am shocked at what it has added up to just in 10 years. It boggles my mind, makes me wonder what I would have had I gone to work for a company that had that when I was 25 instead of waiting until I was 55. The way I would approach it, every one of you going to tell me, oh, Papa, we ain't got any money, we can't save any, it takes everything we make to get by on. Start out small, $5. $5 every week. And if you can get an account at the bank, that's the ideal. Sometimes it takes a minimum amount of money to open that account. So in order to get to that point, put $5 a week in a coffee can. It's untouchable. Put it in top of your closet, leave it alone. Forget that it's there until the next week when you put another $5 in it. And before long, you'll wind up with enough money to go down there to the bank and open a savings account. And then gradually up that number. Okay, you start out at $5 a week. So let's say you do that for 6 months. At the end of 6 months, take it to $7 a week. I mean, we're talking doing without one more soft drink out of the week to get that other $2. So eventually you'll get it up to where you're saving, a reasonably significant amount of money based on your income, and everything's relative. What's significant to me may be way too much for you. What's significant to you may not be so much to me. So it is relative, but I would say find you a number that you think you can live with. Do without something if that's what it takes for you to be able to put that money in a coffee can every week. And I would start, if I were Nathaniel, as the youngest, I would start now. And every one of the rest of you, I would go ahead and start now. You cannot start too soon. It makes all the difference in the world when you get to be retirement age. If you've got some savings in the bank, it makes all the difference in the world when something goes south and all of a sudden you've got to have a new dishwasher or your car needs brakes, or to be able to pay for it instead of putting it on a credit card and paying 25 or 26% interest because you didn't have the $300 to get brakes on your car. So now instead of costing you $300, time is said and done, it's going to cost you $400 because you paid interest on the loan. You do that on everything that you do, and first thing you know, credit card company's getting rich, and you're poor as Job's turkey. You ain't got nothing. And that's the way they want it, because then you're easy to control. This installment debt stuff, like I said last week, it's a relatively new phenomenon. It hadn't been around just a real long time. Even when I was a kid, it was still pretty uncommon for people to have department store credit cards. Visa and MasterCard, I don't know exactly when they started, but it had to have been about that time. It was a pretty big deal when they hit the scene. And of course, they're the biggest ones now. But anyway, they're all to be avoided as much as is possible. But save your money. Put a little bit in the bank every week. If that means you got to do without a Coke, or you got to do without a burrito this week, or you don't get to buy the latest game, or then so be it. We all do without some things that we'd like to have in order to be able to have the things that we need to have when we need them. At my age, I'm looking at trying to. I want to be certain that at no point will me or Mama become some kind of a financial burden on our kids or our grandkids. It's my responsibility to provide for us. When I get to where I can't work anymore and make a living, I got to have enough money to carry me through. So that my job is to figure out how to do that so that we're not having to put a burden on one of y'all. That's the attitude you need to have now. Is you need to figure out how to not be a burden on anybody, how to save your money, how to manage it. Then when you get ready to retire, you won't be a burden on your kids or grandkids. Some of you, if your parents when they get older, and they start needing some things that maybe they can't provide for themselves, you're going to be really glad if you're able to step up to the plate and help them a little bit because of all the help that they've provided you to that point. Then now all of a sudden you get to return the favor and help them a little bit. And that's, ideally that would not ever be a possibility, but things happen, life happens. So my word for this week is to save some money, put a little bit back. You can't shoot for 6 months worth of savings right off the bat. That's not even realistic. But what you can do is take it one day at a time, 1 week at a time, and you can do that. Your first goal, save enough for a month. Okay, if I need $2,000 a month to pay all my bills for the month, then I need to get $2,000 set aside, so that I've got a month's worth of cushion in case I get out of work or I get sick for several days. Some of y'all work by the hours. So if you don't work, you don't get paid. You need to have that cushion so that you can get by. So save a little bit of money. Manage that money. Make it work for you, and that doesn't necessarily mean run out and invest in cryptocurrency or stock market or anything like that. But be the master of the money. Don't let the money be the master of you. And keep on keeping on. You'll get there. It's my daddy tried to tell me some of this stuff when I was a kid, and I was just too hard-headed to listen. I was bound and determined to do things my way, and there's so many times I wish I'd just listened to him. All he was trying to save me was some hardship, and I wouldn't listen. And y'all may choose not to listen either, and that's so be it. If that's the case, that's fine. You're entitled to make your own decisions and call your own shots. But my intent is just try to save you some hard knocks so that you don't have to have some of the hard times and sleepless nights that come from worrying about money. There ain't no kind of worry like worrying about where your next meal's coming from. So, y'all have a good one. Papa loves you, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for coming to the porch. We'll see you.